The doctor said my 11-year-old niece might have 72 hours before her body became too sick to save. Not 72 hours until she died at some exact minute. 72 hours before the swelling, bleeding, and organ failure could close the door on a transplant. Maisie lay behind the glass with a ventilator mask over her face and a yellow cast to skin that had been pink 2 days earlier. A nurse had washed the studio makeup from her cheeks, but a tiny streak of silver glitter still clung beside her left ear. My sister stared at that glitter longer than she looked at her daughter. Dr. Helen Grant kept her voice steady. 10 minutes earlier, Sloan had signed permission for Maisie to be evaluated and receive a transplant if a suitable liver became available. Now the question was whether she would risk her own body. A living donor could change the outcome, but the evaluation has to begin immediately. Blood type is only the first step. We have to assess health, anatomy, and whether the decision is fully voluntary. Sloane's phone vibrated against the table. She turned it over. I caught 3 words before the screen went dark. CNN. Retailer Memo. Child. Sloan? I said. Did you hear her? My sister reached for the cream leather bag resting beside her chair. The same bag she had carried through airport interviews, magazine covers, and the launch party where she told a room full of investors that becoming a mother had taught her every child deserved protection. Dr. Grant stepped closer. As Maisie's biological mother, you may be a possible donor. We can begin the evaluation now if you are willing. Sloan slid her phone into the bag. She did not cry. She did not ask about the scar, the recovery time, or the odds. She looked through the glass at the child, whose face appeared on every Brightvale display in America, then checked the time on her watch. I have a board call in 20 minutes. I thought I had misheard her. Your daughter may not have 3 days. Sloan stood. And if I disappear into surgery, the board replaces me, the offering dies, and 600 people start wondering whether they still have jobs. Then let them replace you, I said. Her eyes hardened. Easy for you to say. You never built anything. Behind the glass, Maisie's monitor changed rhythm. A nurse leaned over her bed. I moved between Sloan and the door. At least take the test. She pulled the strap of her bag onto her shoulder. I'm not throwing away my future for a child who's already dying. The words were quiet. That made them worse. Sloan walked around me. Her heels struck the hospital floor in 4 hard beats, then disappeared beyond the double doors. For a second, no one moved. Dr. Grant looked at me with the careful expression doctors use when they are about to explain what cannot be promised. I stopped her. Test me, I said. My voice shook, so I said it again. Test me. If I'm compatible, operate now. We can start the emergency donor evaluation, she said. But I need you to understand that compatibility does not guarantee you can donate. Then find out. A nurse opened the door to Maisie's room. My niece turned her head a fraction toward me. Aunt Beth? I went to her. Her lips barely moved beneath the mask. Mom said I took them. Took what? Her eyes drifted toward the canvas bag under the chair. The shoes. She said if anyone asks, I took them from her desk. Inside the bag, beneath a sweatshirt printed with the Brightvale logo, I found a torn silver wrapper with a purple berry on the front. The batch code had been stamped crooked. 3 days later, while Maisie and I lay in separate recovery rooms with one liver working between us, Sloan sat beneath the lights at CNN and asked the network to play the commercial that would prove she was a good mother. They played it. Then they played the 8 seconds she had ordered cut. Before the segment ended, Brightvale's board had suspended her. Its largest retailers had pulled the product, and the future she had chosen over her daughter was collapsing on live television. Before I tell you how those 8 seconds survived, I hope you're doing well today. Stay with me, and please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of Maisie's story. But that came later. In that moment, the only thing I trusted was the crooked code beneath my thumb, and the fear in Maisie's eyes. I handed the wrapper to Dr. Grant. A nurse photographed it, sealed it in a clear evidence bag, and signed across the seal. "This stays with the treatment team," Dr. Grant said. "We need to know what she swallowed." On the chart, Daniel Pierce's name appeared beneath deceased, 2021. Since cancer took Maisie's legal father, Sloan had been the only parent authorized to make medical decisions. She had signed the transplant consent before walking out, so Maisie's evaluation could continue. "What did Sloan report?" I asked. "An over-the-counter cold medicine and a Bright Veil sample," Dr. Grant said. "Her company sent an ingredient sheet listing berry extract, ginger, elderflower, and flavoring. None of that explains this pattern." The words "this pattern" made my stomach tighten. A technician drew 6 tubes of blood. Cold spread through my fingers as I stared at the ceiling. The rapid typing results showed I was compatible enough to continue, but matching blood was only the first gate. My liver, anatomy, infections, heart, lungs, and state of mind still had to be assessed. Marisol Vega, the living donor advocate, met me alone. "You may stop at any point," she said. "You do not owe this because you are her aunt. The hospital will not approve you because the family needs a hero." "I'm not trying to be one." "Then tell me what you are trying to do." I looked through the narrow window at Maisie's bed. "Keep her alive long enough to grow up and decide who she wants to be." Marisol studied me before making a note. "That is an answer. It is not yet clearance." Rosa Alvarez, the hospital social worker, documented Sloan's departure, Maisie's whisper, and the missing exposure history. Sloan's earlier consent kept treatment moving, but Rosa said concealing a possible toxin while a child's organs failed was not a family disagreement. Maisie opened her eyes again, while a nurse adjusted the line in her arm. "Aunt Beth, is Mom going to lose the company because of me?" The question hurt more than the needle had. "Your job is to stay here," I told her. "The adults are responsible for everything outside this room." Years earlier, when Bright Veil was folding tables and handwritten labels, Sloan asked me to review its claims. I circled clinically safe and proven for children and asked for the studies. She laughed before our parents and said I was always looking for what could go wrong. For years, I wondered whether caution was only fear wearing sensible shoes. My phone buzzed before I could follow that memory any further. Bright Veil had issued a public statement. It said Maisie Rowe had become ill after taking an unreleased test product from a restricted office without permission. The company expressed concern for her recovery, while insisting the product had never been approved for use by children. I read it twice. Sloan had not merely left her daughter. She had prepared the accusation before the doctors even knew what had poisoned her. Near noon, the toxicologist told us Maisie's tests and rapid liver injury were consistent with severe acetaminophen exposure. A specialized adduct test had been sent for confirmation, but it would take time. "Acetaminophen?" I asked. "That isn't on the Bright Veil sheet." "No," Dr. Grant said. "It isn't disclosed anywhere they sent us." She placed 2 pages on the table in front of me. One scheduled the scans that would determine whether my liver could be divided safely. The other was an urgent demand for Bright Veil's complete formula and manufacturing records. Across the second page, beside Sunbury Junior Relief Chews, someone had typed 3 words: "Ingredient not disclosed." I looked toward the doors where Sloan had vanished and understood that she had not simply chosen her company over her child. She was withholding something the doctors needed to save Maisie. By the time the technician fastened the electrodes to my chest, my hands were so cold she asked whether the room temperature was bothering me. "It's the needles," I admitted. She glanced at the 6 empty blood tubes waiting beside my elbow. "You picked a difficult day to hate needles. I've hated them efficiently for 43 years. The joke bought me half a breath. Then the needle went in, and the ceiling lights blurred at the edges. I turned my face toward the wall and counted the tiny holes in an acoustic panel until the dizziness passed. There was nothing heroic about it. My stomach rolled, sweat gathered beneath my collar. When the technician removed the needle, I had to remain flat, while she pressed juice into my hand and waited for the color to return to my face. Marisol Vega found me 10 minutes later in a consultation room, still holding the unopened juice box. She closed the door before sitting across from me. I need to ask you something that may feel insulting. Today has set a high bar. Are you doing this to save Maisie? Or are you doing it to defeat your sister? The question struck harder because I had already asked it of myself. I'm furious with Sloane. That was not my question. I looked down at the cotton taped inside my elbow. If no one ever knew I was the donor, I would still do it. If Maisie woke up believing the liver came from a stranger, I would still do it. If Sloane stood beside her bed afterward and took credit for everything, I would hate it, but I would still do it. Marisol watched my face instead of writing. I don't want to become better than my sister, I said. I want Maisie to become 12. Only then did Marisol make a note. She reminded me again that I could stop. The doctors could give my family a neutral medical explanation, so no one would know whether I had withdrawn or been rejected. The right to leave belonged to me, even if Maisie's condition worsened. I understood why she kept repeating it. A decision made under fear could look voluntary while feeling like a locked room. Before she left, she pushed the juice box closer. Drink that before the next blood draw. The next blood draw was followed by an electrocardiogram, a chest exam, questions about every surgery, medication, infection, and illness I had ever had. Each answer moved me 1 inch closer to a decision that still belonged to people studying numbers on screens. While I waited, Rosa Alvarez came into the room carrying a tablet, and the expression she used when bad news had arrived wearing professional language. We contacted Miss Rowe and asked her to return, she said. The transplant team needs several additional signatures and a complete exposure history. Is she coming? Brightvale's general counsel responded on her behalf. They are reviewing the request. Maisie's liver is failing, and they are reviewing whether to tell the doctors what she swallowed. Rosa did not soften it. That is what their message means. She showed me the hospital photograph of the silver wrapper. The crooked batch code sat beneath the torn edge. SB 41C. I had reviewed enough procurement records to recognize the shape of commercial inventory codes. Brightvale's retail products used a 2-letter family code, a 6-digit production date, and a plant suffix. This one looked like an internal development batch. That isn't a store code, I said. You're certain? I'm certain it isn't formatted like the products they sell publicly. That did not prove what was inside. It only proved the wrapper had come from somewhere Brightvale did not want customers to see. There had been a time when Brightvale had no customers at all. Sloane started it at her kitchen counter with glass jars, handwritten labels, and photographs of baby Maisie asleep against her shoulder. She told people motherhood had taught her to distrust anything she could not pronounce. By the time Maisie entered kindergarten, her face was on pharmacy displays. By 11, she had appeared in more advertising campaigns than most actors twice her age. I had helped with the first labels. When Sloane wanted to print clinically safe for children across the front of a herbal syrup, I asked for the clinical data. She laughed in front of our parents and said, "Bethany can find a fire code violation in a candle." Everyone laughed with her. I stopped reviewing labels after that. My phone vibrated with a message from a number I did not recognize. The sender identified herself as Dana Whitcomb from CNN Investigates and said she had received my contact information through counsel representing Dr. Anika Shah. I almost deleted it. Then another message arrived. We have been investigating Brightvale quality complaints for several weeks. I will not ask for Maisie's medical records or photographs. I need to confirm whether the Sunbury name was known to the treatment team before Brightvale's public statement. I showed Rosa the screen before replying. You may speak about what you personally saw, she said. You may not release Maisie's hospital documents, photographs, test results, or information from her chart. I stepped into a quiet corner of the waiting area and called Dana. Her voice was calm and unsentimental. She did not ask me to describe Maisie's condition. She did not ask for a dramatic quote about Sloane leaving. Did you personally see packaging bearing the Sunbury name? She asked. Yes. Was it delivered to the clinical team? I handed it to Dr. Grant. The hospital secured it. Did I tell you the product name before you confirmed it? Yes. A short pause followed. I heard a keyboard. We received the name from an internal source before your niece was hospitalized, Dana said. We also have complaints involving inconsistent product performance, but we do not yet have enough verified evidence to say why. Then why contact me? Because a company statement claims the product was never intended for children, while its name, branding, and campaign materials appear directed at children. That contradiction matters. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to hand Sloane's entire empire to the first person willing to strike a match. Instead, I said, I won't give you anything from Maisie's medical file. You shouldn't, Dana replied. If our reporting depends on private hospital records obtained from an aunt without authority, then our reporting is not ready. That answer made me trust her slightly more than I wanted to. When I returned to the transplant hallway, Sloane was standing outside Maisie's room with 2 lawyers. She had changed jackets. Her hair had been smoothed, and fresh concealer covered the shadows beneath her eyes. She never looked through the glass. One lawyer spoke first. We are here to retrieve Brightvale property mistakenly included with the patient's personal effects. You mean the wrapper? We mean all branded materials, prototypes, garments, and packaging. Rosa stepped beside me. The patient's belongings remain with the hospital and her authorized family. Items relevant to treatment are not being released to a corporation. Sloane's gaze moved to the canvas bag under Rosa's desk. That bag came from my studio. It belongs to your daughter, I said. You have no idea what belongs to whom. Her voice stayed low because nurses were passing. You have spent your entire life waiting for me to fail. Now you are using my daughter's illness to make yourself important. My body still trembled from the blood draw, but my voice did not. I'm trying to become medically useful. You're trying to become legally untouchable. One of the lawyers shifted forward. Sloane raised a hand, stopping him. Her control mattered more to her than the argument. She leaned closer. Be careful who you trust. Anika Shah was fired for misconduct. Her lawyer turned a tablet toward us. The image showed Anika leaving a Brightvale testing room after hours, carrying a hard-sided cooler. A timestamp glowed in the corner. Dr. Shah removed controlled samples from company property, he said. Those samples may have been altered after they left our custody. For the first time, doubt found a place to land. If Anika had taken the batch, could she have changed it? Could the entire scandal have begun as revenge from a dismissed employee? I hated myself for wondering, but suspicion was not betrayal. It was the reason I had survived years of contracts designed to hide risk beneath polished language. Sloane saw the uncertainty cross my face. That woman has been threatening me for months, she said. CNN is building a story around a thief. She turned away before I could answer. She and the lawyers walked toward the elevators without once entering Maisie's room. An hour later, an attorney representing Anika sent Rosa and me a limited set of documents. The first was a sample transfer log. Every seal number matched. The cooler had not been taken home. It had been delivered to an independent laboratory, under instructions from Anika's whistleblower counsel. The second document identified SB 41C as an internal Sunbury batch placed on quality hold. The laboratory results were still being finalized. At the bottom of the hold request was a date. I read it once, then counted backward. The quarantine order had been signed 12 days before Maisie's commercial shoot. My phone chimed again. A new email from Anika's attorney appeared at the top of the screen. The subject line read, Quarantine. Override. Authorized by CEO Office. Before I could open the attachment, a nurse called my name from the imaging room door. We're ready for your liver scan. I looked from the email to the closed room where Maisie was fighting to remain eligible for surgery. Then I handed my phone to Rosa and followed the nurse inside. The door shut before I could learn whose signature had moved a quarantined product from a locked laboratory into my niece's mouth. The CT scanner closed around me like a white tunnel. A recorded voice told me when to hold my breath, and I obeyed because breathing was the only thing in my life that still felt simple. Contrast dye warmed my veins, until it felt as though I had wet myself. The technician had warned me about that sensation, but embarrassment still came before reason. I kept my arms above my head and stared at a thin seam in the machine while images were taken of the organ I had never thought about until someone I loved needed part of it. When the table slid out, Dr. Grant was waiting beyond the glass with another physician from the living donor team. She did not smile, but her face had softened. "The preliminary anatomy is encouraging," she said. "Your liver volume appears sufficient, and the vessels may be suitable. That is not approval. The radiologists, surgeons, cardiology team, and donor committee still have to review everything." I asked how long the review would take, and she answered, "Today, if the remaining tests cooperate." I sat up too quickly, and the room tipped. The technician steadied my shoulder. My body was already asking questions my determination had ignored. Rosa returned my phone once I was dressed. The email from Annika's attorney was still open. Attached to it was a scanned transfer request for 6 boxes of Sunbury Junior Relief Chews from a quarantine development batch. Beside the authorization line, an executive assistant had typed 4 words. "Approved per SR office." SR could have meant Sloan Rowe. It could also have been an abbreviation copied by someone who never spoke to her. Years of compliance work had taught me the difference between something suspicious and something proven. "We need the original record," I told Rosa. "Metadata, the assistant who entered it, and whatever instruction she received. This page points somewhere. It does not finish the journey." Rosa nodded. "I'll preserve the email with the hospital notes, but corporate evidence belongs with the lawyers and investigators, not Maisie's chart unless it affects treatment." That boundary mattered. I was not going to save Maisie by turning her hospital room into a courtroom. A television mounted above the family waiting area flickered to Brightvale's social media feed. Sloan appeared against a pale cream wall, dressed in soft blue, without the jacket she had worn at the hospital. Her makeup was restrained enough to suggest exhaustion without allowing her to look unprepared. "Our family is facing a private medical crisis," she said. "My focus remains on my daughter's recovery and on the hundreds of Brightvale employees who serve families every day. We ask the public not to spread speculation promoted by former employees with personal grievances." She never said she had left the hospital. She never said the doctors had asked her to be evaluated. She never said Maisie had whispered a prepared confession before she could barely keep her eyes open. Sloan had always understood that the cleanest lie was a frame, with the inconvenient parts cropped out. When I returned to Maisie's room, she was awake enough to follow me with her eyes. The yellow in her skin looked deeper beneath the fluorescent lights. I pulled the chair close but did not touch the canvas bag or mention CNN. "Do you remember the Sunbury shoot?" I asked. She nodded once. "Did you eat anything during it?" "The chews." Her voice was rough. "They wanted me to chew and smile." "Were they real chews or props?" "Real ones. The fake ones didn't look shiny enough." I kept my face still, even as something cold moved through my chest. "How many did you eat?" Her forehead tightened. "I don't know. We did it again a lot." "That's okay. You don't have to guess." She closed her eyes, then opened them again. "I told Mom they tasted bitter. The other box tasted like berries." I asked what Sloan had said, and Maisie's fingers moved weakly against the blanket. She said the camera made everything feel different. I waited, rather than filling the silence for her. After a moment, she whispered. Later she said if anyone asked, I should say I took the box because I wanted candy. The machine beside her bed continued its steady rhythm. My anger did not arrive loudly. It settled into me with the weight of a final answer. Sloan had not invented her defense after Maisie collapsed. She had placed it in her daughter's mouth, while the child was already becoming sick. I didn't take it, Maisie said. She gave it to the lady with the tray. I believe you. Will people lose their jobs if I say that? That is not a decision an 11-year-old is responsible for. Her eyes filled, but she was too tired to cry properly. Mom said everybody depends on her. I leaned closer. Right now, you depend on us. That comes first. I told Dr. Grant what Maisie remembered, using her words as closely as I could. I did not ask Maisie to repeat the account for every person who entered. Dr. Grant documented the exposure history and said a child life specialist would help if more questions became medically necessary. That afternoon, Maya Chen met me in a small room near the donor clinic. No Brightvale lawyer was present. She explained that Maisie's insurance and the transplant program would cover most medical expenses connected to my evaluation, surgery, and required follow-up. My employer had confirmed I qualified for protected FMLA leave, and I had accumulated paid days I could use before any unpaid period began. A lawful donor assistance program could help with eligible travel and incidental costs. You do not need Brightvale's permission or money to remain in the donor process, Maya said. I had not realized how tightly I had been holding my shoulders until they dropped. Less than an hour later, Brightvale's attorneys requested a meeting in the same room. The older lawyer placed a folder on the table. He spoke gently, as though kindness could change the purpose of paper. Brightvale would replace all wages I lost, cover expenses outside insurance, and retain me as a paid compliance consultant for 6 months after recovery. In exchange, I would agree not to discuss internal materials, the hospital crisis, or statements made by Sloan. I would also sign a declaration saying Maisie had removed an unreleased product from a restricted office without authorization. You are asking me to finance my recovery by blaming a sick child, I said. We are asking you to avoid making claims outside your direct knowledge. I directly heard Maisie say her mother coached her to take the blame. He slid a pen toward me. Children in critical condition can become confused. Marisol, seated beside Rosa, stopped the meeting. She stated that any financial offer tied to my testimony could affect the donor team's assessment of coercion. Rosa recorded the terms. I wrote my refusal beneath the signature line, dated it, and pushed the folder back. Maya's explanation had removed the only leverage the offer might have held. My medical care would continue whether Brightvale approved of me or not. Marisol interviewed me again that evening. This time she asked what I would do if the surgery caused chronic pain, delayed my return to work, or changed my health in ways no one could predict. I don't have a perfect plan, I said. I have savings, leave, and people at work who will help. I'm afraid of waking up in pain. I'm afraid I'll resent how much it costs me. Does that change your decision? No. Nobody promised Maisie a body without scars. I can't demand one for myself as the price of helping her. After midnight, Dr. Grant found me beside Maisie's bed. She said my blood type remained compatible. The anatomy looked potentially suitable, and the medical team had found no immediate disqualifier. Final approval still depended on the donor committee and the last test results. Then she looked through the glass at Maisie's monitors. No deceased. Donor liver has become available, she said. Her clotting is worsening, and we are seeing signs that the window is narrowing. If the committee approves you tomorrow, both operating rooms may need to be ready the following morning. I looked at Maisie's small hand resting beneath the blanket and understood that the next decision would not be theoretical. By sunrise, the hospital might be asking whether I was willing to let surgeons divide my liver while my sister told the world this was only a private family crisis. The next morning, Marisol asked everyone to leave the donor consultation room. Dr. Grant gathered Maisie's charts and stepped into the hallway. Rosa followed her. Even the transplant surgeon who had come to explain the operation was told to wait outside. When the door closed, Marisol sat across from me and placed a single form on the table. This room belongs to you, she said. Not to Maisie, not to your sister, and not to the transplant team. I need to know what you want when no one else is here to hear the answer. The room was small enough that I could hear the ventilation system click on above us. My latest test results were displayed on her tablet, but she turned the screen face down. She explained the risks without dressing them in medical language. I could bleed badly enough to need another operation. I could develop an infection or a leak in the ducts that carried bile from my liver. I might have pain that lasted far longer than anyone expected. I could be away from work for weeks or months. In rare cases, a healthy donor could suffer permanent injury or die. Then she told me the part I had been trying not to imagine. Even if my surgery went exactly as planned, Maisie's body could reject the liver. Her organs might already be too damaged. She might never wake up. My mouth went dry. So I could wake up, and she might not. Yes, that answer stayed between us. Marisol pushed the form closer. It stated that I could withdraw at any time, including after the operating rooms had been prepared. If I changed my mind, the hospital would protect my privacy and tell the family only that I was no longer medically eligible. No one would be allowed to demand a reason. I signed beneath the paragraph confirming that I understood. Marisol did not collect the paper immediately. What makes you want to continue? I looked at the blank wall behind her and remembered Maisie at 6 years old, sitting on a studio floor while Sloan approved photographs for a Brightvale campaign. Maisie had watched an editor discard picture after picture of her smiling. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Why does the camera need more versions of me than there are of the real me?" At the time, I told her cameras were picky. It was the kind of answer adults gave children when the truthful answer made us uncomfortable. Now I understood she had spent half her life learning that the version people saw mattered more than the child who had to create it. "I want her to grow old enough to stop performing," I told Marisol. "I want her to have years that no one can edit." Marisol picked up the signed form. "That is your reason. Hold on to it when everyone else starts telling you what your decision means." The door opened 20 minutes later, but it was not the transplant surgeon who entered. Sloan came in with the same senior attorney who had offered me the folder the day before. This time, she carried no designer bag. Her hands were empty, as though she wanted the room to believe she had arrived without an agenda. Marisol remained beside me. Sloan placed a new proposal on the table. Brightvale would replace every dollar of income I lost while using FMLA. After my recovery, the company would give me a 6-month consulting contract at twice my current salary. A charitable fund bearing Maisie's name would support families of children awaiting transplants. For one dangerous second, the offer looked almost generous. Then, I reached the final pages. I would agree that Maisie had taken an unreleased product without permission. I would make no public statements about Sloan, Brightvale, the hospital crisis, or any materials I had seen. I would stop communicating with journalists and surrender copies of all corporate records sent to me. "The transplant program already explained my financial options," I said. "My surgery does not depend on Brightvale." "This is not about dependence," Sloan replied. "It is about protecting you." "You mean controlling me after you failed to control what Maisie told the doctors?" The attorney leaned forward. "The declaration only asks you to state what you can personally verify. I can personally verify that Maisie said her mother told her to take the blame." Sloan's expression tightened. She was medicated and confused. She said the same thing before the strongest medication began. "You have always preferred the worst interpretation of me." I closed the proposal. "This isn't an interpretation. It's a condition printed beside a dollar amount." Sloan glanced at Marisol, perhaps expecting her to leave us alone. Marisol did not move. "The fund could help hundreds of children," Sloan said. "You are willing to destroy that because you need everyone to see you as the one who saved Maisie." The accusation struck an old place in me. For years, Sloan had described every objection as envy. If I questioned a claim, I wanted her company. If I protected Maisie from a long shoot, I wanted her child. If I refused to applaud, I wanted her life. This time, the old doubt did not rise. I don't want your position, I said. I want your daughter to have a future you refuse to risk yours for. The room went completely still. Sloane's face changed before she forced it smooth again. You think one operation makes you her mother? No. It makes me her donor. You are the one who keeps confusing care with ownership. She took the proposal from my hands and stood. The attorney followed her, but Sloane paused at the door. If Brightvale collapses, Maisie will know you helped do it. No, I said. She will know the truth was already there. After they left, Marisol added the meeting to her report. The revised offer and my refusal became part of the donor committee's assessment, not because refusing made me morally superior, but because the committee needed proof that money had not purchased my consent. My phone rang while I was waiting for the final review. Dana Whitcomb asked whether I could speak privately. One of our sources remembers a problem during the Sunbury shoot, she said. A freelance editor named Evan Cole worked on the campaign. Does he have the footage? He has not confirmed that yet. His contract required him to retain project files for 90 days, partly for continuity and production insurance. Brightvale also disputed part of his final invoice, so his records were never formally transferred and deleted. Will he give them to you? He is consulting an attorney. He does not want to violate a contract because a reporter asks him to. That hesitation reassured me more than instant cooperation would have. Evan was not handing out private footage for revenge. He was checking whether he could preserve and verify what he had without destroying its value as evidence. What does he remember? I asked. A child became ill during repeated takes. He remembers someone asking whether filming should stop. Who answered? He will not say until the original files are authenticated. Dana promised nothing else. She only said CNN had sent Brightvale a new request for comment and was continuing its independent verification. When the call ended, the donor committee summoned me. 6 people sat around a conference table. They had reviewed my scans, blood work, heart tests, psychological assessment, financial plan, and interviews. The surgeon showed me a simple image of my liver and traced the section they intended to remove. The projected graft size should be adequate for Maisie's body, he said. Your remaining liver volume is also within an acceptable range. I waited for the qualification. It came from Dr. Grant. You are approved as a living donor, but Maisie's condition is worsening. Waiting increases the chance she becomes too unstable for surgery. When? Tomorrow morning. A coordinator placed the surgical schedule in front of me. At the top were 2 operating rooms, 2 teams, and 2 start times separated by less than an hour. Between the rooms, someone had drawn an arrow showing the path the donated liver segment would travel. I had spent years hearing sacrifice described as love, courage, and family. On that page, it was a line between 2 operating rooms. I signed beside my name and watched the coordinator circle the time when they would take part of my liver out of my body and carry it into Maisie's. The night before surgery, the nurses moved Maisie into a quieter room at the end of the pediatric transplant hall. The lights were dimmer there, and the machines seemed less aggressive, though I knew that was only because someone had lowered the volume. I had been told to rest in the donor unit, but Dr. Grant allowed me 20 minutes with Maisie before both teams began their final preparations. A nurse helped me into the chair beside her bed, because my legs had started shaking the moment I entered the room. Maisie watched me settle beneath the thin hospital blanket they had draped around my shoulders. Are you cold? She asked. A little. You always say hospitals are too warm. I've changed my official position. Her mouth lifted slightly. It was the first trace of a smile I had seen since she arrived. She shifted beneath the blanket, then immediately grimaced. The back of her hospital gown had twisted beneath her. These were designed by someone who never had to keep a secret behind them, she whispered. I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound felt strange in the room, but not wrong. I'll include that in my formal complaint. Make the mad pants. I'll demand pockets too. Maisie's smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. Her eyes moved to the IV line in my arm, then to the identification band around my wrist. Aunt Beth, can you die? The question had no decoration around it. Children rarely wasted words when adults had already frightened them enough. I took her hand carefully. The doctors believe I'll be safe. But safe does not mean nothing can go wrong. Her fingers tightened around mine. They told me your liver grows back. It should. What if it doesn't? Then the doctors will take care of me. What if they can't? I wanted to promise her I would wake up, walk into her room, and complain about the food. I wanted to build a future so certain that she could rest inside it. Instead, I told her the truth. There are risks. I could bleed. I could get an infection. Recovery may be harder than we hope. The doctors believe those risks are low enough for them to approve me, but they are not zero. Maisie turned her face toward the window. I don't want you to do it. The words hurt, but they did not surprise me. She had spent years being taught that everything given to her came with a camera, a contract, or an expectation. I know. If you get hurt because of me, I'll have to think about it forever. You are not doing this to me. She looked back. I am choosing this, I said. You are not taking it from me. But you wouldn't need surgery if I wasn't sick. That is true. It still does not make the decision yours. Her lower lip trembled. Mom said people depend on Brightvale. If the company closes, hundreds of families will hate me. I felt anger rise, but I refused to bring Sloan into that room as another threat Maisie had to survive. Employees depend on adults making safe decisions, I said. Investors depend on adults telling the truth. Customers depend on adults not selling something dangerous. None of those responsibilities belong to you. But if I tell people what happened, everything could fall apart. A healthy company does not fall apart because an 11-year-old tells the truth. If Brightvale falls, it will be because adults built it on something that could not stand. She stared at our joined hands. I didn't steal the chews. I know. I thought if I said what Mom told me to say, maybe she would come back. That was the closest Maisie came to crying. Her face did not crumple. She only blinked too slowly, as though she could keep the tears inside by refusing to move. I leaned close enough that she could feel my breath against her hair. You never have to accuse yourself to earn someone's return. A knock interrupted us. Rosa entered with a tablet against her chest and an expression that told me Sloan had found another way to reach the room without entering it. She sent a request through her public relations team, Rosa said. They want a photograph of Sloan holding Maisie's hand before surgery. The proposed statement says the family is united and focused on healing. Maisie's fingers went still inside mine. Is she coming here? She asked. Rosa answered gently. She asked for a photographer to be admitted. She did not ask to visit privately. I looked at the tablet. The request included lighting preferences, approved angles, and instructions that no medical equipment appear prominently in the frame. No, I said. Rosa nodded. The hospital has already declined. Maisie is not medically stable enough for a media session, and no commercial or public relations photography will be permitted. Maisie turned toward the wall. I asked Rosa where Sloan was. She is meeting with Brightvale's board and communications advisors. The answer landed with less force than it would have the day before. Sloan's absence was no longer a shock. It had become a decision she kept making. After Rosa left, Maisie asked whether her mother knew the surgery was happening in the morning. She knows. Did she say anything? I could not tell her that Sloan's latest communication had concerned camera angles. She knows the doctors are doing everything they can, I said. Maisie did not challenge the answer, but I could tell she recognized the part I had left out. Dr. Grant arrived with the transplant surgeon and Marisol shortly before midnight. They kept the final explanation simple. My operation would begin first. Once the surgeons removed the planned section of my liver and confirmed it was healthy, another team would carry it directly to Maisie's operating room. The two procedures would overlap. If the surgeons found something unexpected inside me, they could stop. If they stop yours, what happens to mine? Maisie asked. Dr. Grant answered her directly. We continue supporting you while we search for another option. We do not take part of Bethany's liver unless we believe it can be transplanted safely. There was no heroic language. There were only 2 teams, 2 rooms, blood waiting in reserve, and a plan designed around everything that might go wrong. Marisol asked me one final time whether I wanted to continue. I looked at Maisie. Yes. She placed the consent form on the rolling table. I read every page, even though I had already heard the same risks twice. My signature looked unsteady at the bottom, but it was mine. Before taking my phone, Marisol gave me 5 minutes to send any necessary messages. I wrote to my supervisor, then opened the secure number Dana Whitcomb had given me. Verify everything independently. Do not use Maisie's medical records or private hospital information. I can speak only about what I personally saw and about my own donor decision. Dana replied almost immediately. Understood. We will not ask the hospital for protected records. Evan Cole has confirmed through counsel that the original project files still exist. Authentication is underway. My thumb hovered above the screen. What is on them? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then returned. I cannot tell you until verification is complete. I respected the answer, though every part of me wanted more. Marisol held out her hand for the phone. Time. I switched it off and gave it to her before I could ask another question. The transport team arrived just before dawn. They moved me onto a narrow bed and fastened a warm air blanket over my body. Across the room, nurses prepared Maisie for the trip to the pediatric operating suite. Our beds were pushed into the same hallway. For a few yards, we traveled side by side beneath the ceiling lights. Maisie reached toward me, but the rails kept our hands apart. I stretched my fingers through the opening until they touched hers. I'm scared, she said. So am I. She looked surprised. Doesn't that make it worse? No. It means neither of us has to pretend. At the junction near the elevators, the team stopped. My bed would turn left toward the adult donor operating rooms. Maisie's would continue straight toward pediatric surgery. The nurse released the brake beneath my bed. A sharp metallic click echoed through the corridor. I kept my eyes on Maisie. Meet me on the other side of this, I said. Her fingers slipped away as our beds began moving in different directions. The doors to my operating room opened, and cold air touched my face. I saw white lights, blue gowns, and the anesthesiologist waiting beside the table. Behind me, another set of doors closed around Maisie. Then the wheels locked into place beneath me, and every sound in the room seemed to disappear. Cold spread through the vein in my left arm as the anesthesiologist adjusted the line above me. The operating room lights formed a white circle so bright that everything outside it disappeared. You may feel sleepy very quickly, he said. Think of somewhere you want to wake up. I tried to picture Maisie at 12, blowing out candles without a camera pointed at her. Before I could finish the image, the ceiling shifted farther away. The anesthesiologist asked me to count backward from 10. I reached 7. When I opened my eyes again, something was pressing down on my chest. I tried to push it away, but my arms barely moved. A dull pain stretched beneath my ribs, deep and heavy, as though someone had placed a hot stone inside me and sewn the skin closed around it. My mouth was so dry that my tongue seemed stuck to my teeth. I heard a monitor, rubber soles, and a woman asking me to take a slow breath. I did, and pain cut across my abdomen. Maisie, I whispered. The nurse leaned closer. You're in recovery, Bethany. Your surgery is over. Maisie? We're contacting her team. That was not an answer. I tried to lift my head, but the room tilted and nausea rose into my throat. The nurse pressed medication into my IV and told me not to fight my body. I had spent 2 days making decisions. Now I could not even turn onto my side without permission. Dr. Grant appeared beside the bed sometime later. I could not tell whether 10 minutes or an hour had passed. Her surgical cap was gone, but a red line crossed her forehead where it had pressed against her skin. The graft was transplanted, she said. Blood flow is established, and the first laboratory signs suggest it has begun functioning. I closed my eyes. Is she alive? Yes. The word reached me before the rest of her explanation. Maisie remained in pediatric intensive care. Her clotting, brain function, kidneys, and circulation would be watched constantly. The next 24 to 48 hours were still dangerous. A liver beginning to work did not erase the damage that had already occurred. I understood enough to be afraid, and not enough to ask useful questions. Did she wake up? Not yet. She is still sedated. I tried to sit up. Pain seized my abdomen so sharply that the sound leaving my mouth did not feel human. The nurse lowered me and supported the incision with a folded pillow. Dr. Grant waited until my breathing slowed. You cannot go to her room today. Your body has undergone major surgery. I need to see her. You need to remain conscious long enough to recover. Her tone was firm, but not unkind. She had promised neither of us an easy morning. I had only forgotten that the promise included me. Marisol arrived after I'd managed 2 ice chips without vomiting. She stood where I could see her without turning my head. You completed the part only you could complete, she said. Now you are allowed to stop controlling the rest. I wasn't controlling it very well before. That has never stopped anyone from trying. She told me Evan Cole had transferred authenticated copies of the original Sunbury Project files to his attorney and CNN's legal team. He had not uploaded them to social media or sold them. The files had been copied in a controlled process, their metadata preserved, and the original storage device secured. What's on them? I asked. Dana still will not release details before legal review is complete. Even through the medication, frustration tightened my jaw. Marisol saw it. You trusted doctors to carry part of your liver into another room without watching them do it. You can trust verified people to carry evidence without placing it in your hands. The comparison was unfair because it was true. Later, an attorney assisting Annika called through Rosa's office. Rosa placed the phone on speaker beside my bed because I could not hold it steadily. The independent laboratory had completed testing on the sealed SB41C retention samples. The chews contained acetaminophen that was absent from the declared formula, and the amount varied sharply from one piece to another. The seals and transfer numbers matched Annika's quality records, proving the samples had been collected before she was fired and before Maisie's commercial shoot. CNN now possessed evidence from several directions that did not depend on the hospital. Brightvale's own batch photographs matched the wrapper code. Annika's records documented the quarantine. Shipping logs showed boxes from SB41C moved from the testing facility to the studio. The independent laboratory confirmed the hidden ingredient. Evan's files showed what happened during production. And Maisie's results? I asked. The hospital is not providing them, Rosa reminded me. Neither are you. CNN could report that Brightvale had produced and moved a quarantined batch. It could report the test results from the independent laboratory and the contents of the company's own files. It could say I underwent a donor evaluation and surgery because I had authorized Dana to describe my experience. It could not use Maisie's private chart, ICU photographs, or medical details supplied by the hospital. Dana says they will not state Maisie's specific diagnosis unless Sloan makes it public herself or an authorized representative later permits it, Rosa said. The boundary should have frustrated me. Instead, it comforted me. Maisie had already lost control of her face to advertisements. She would not lose control of her body to a news segment simply because the truth was useful. By late afternoon, the pain medication made time come apart in soft pieces. I woke to find Maya checking the forms attached to the end of my bed. I woke again when a respiratory therapist made me breathe into a plastic device. The third time, Leah Morrison's name was glowing on Rosa's phone. Rosa had received an update through the lawyers representing the board. Sloan had spent most of the day insisting Annika had sabotaged the company and that I had manipulated Maisie while she was frightened and medicated. She claimed Brightvale's enemies were exploiting a family emergency to derail its public offering. The board's outside counsel had reviewed the quarantine order, the laboratory confirmation, and the shipment to the studio. Leah was drafting a resolution to suspend Sloan as CEO and block her from speaking on behalf of Brightvale while an independent investigation began. "Has it passed?" I asked. "Not yet," Rosa said. "They are convening formally tonight." Sloan had responded by arranging a live CNN appearance as a private individual. She believed the board could restrict her title but not her identity as Maisie's mother. Brightvale's communications team had already sent CNN the finished Sunbury commercial. In the approved version, Maisie smiled, chewed the product, and delivered the line Sloan had selected. The company called it proof that Maisie had been healthy, willing, and happy during filming. "Sloan asked them to play it?" I said. She insisted. I remembered my sister approving photographs at the kitchen table, discarding every image that showed fatigue, irritation, or fear. She had always believed the chosen version became the real one once enough people saw it. A pediatric nurse called my room shortly before evening rounds. She could not move Maisie out of intensive care, and I could not be wheeled across the campus. Instead, she placed a hospital tablet beside Maisie's bed and connected it to the screen mounted near mine. The image appeared slowly. Maisie lay beneath white blankets with more tubes than I could count. Her face was swollen. Machines surrounded her, but the green rhythm on the monitor continued moving. "She's still sedated," the nurse said. "Her new liver is producing bile, and some of her laboratory values are moving in the right direction. We are watching her minute by minute." I touched the screen with 2 fingers. Maisie did not open her eyes. She did not need to. For that moment, seeing her chest rise was enough. The connection ended after less than a minute. I wanted to ask them to turn it back on, but I knew I would spend the night staring at every number and imagining I could keep her alive through attention alone. A television remained on above the door, because the remote had been placed beyond my reach. I considered calling the nurse to switch it off, then saw the CNN logo fill the screen. A photograph of Sloan appeared beside the Brightvale emblem. She wore white and looked directly into the camera, composed even in the still image. Across the bottom of the screen, a line of text announced the next morning's program. CNN investigates Brightvale. Live response from CEO Sloan Rowe tomorrow. I reached toward the remote on the counter. Pain stopped me before my fingers reached the bedrail. The woman who had built an empire by deciding what America was allowed to see had chosen one more camera, and for the first time in my life, I was too weak to stop her. I lay back against the pillow and watched the teaser repeat. The morning after surgery, a nurse raised my bed by 5 degrees at a time, because sitting upright all at once made the incision feel as though it were tearing open. I held a folded pillow against my abdomen and breathed in shallow pulls. Every cough came with a warning, followed by pain sharp enough to make my eyes water. When the nurse finally helped me place both feet on the floor, the distance between the mattress and the chair looked farther than the hallway I had walked into surgery. "You are not crossing the room alone," she said. "I wasn't planning an escape." You looked at the door. I was planning a very slow escape. She guided me into the chair and checked my blood pressure while I waited for Dr. Grant. My body felt heavier than it had the day before, but my mind was clearer. The anesthesia had released me into a world where the consequences were no longer theoretical. Dr. Grant entered with an update from pediatric intensive care. Maisie's new liver was producing bile. Her clotting numbers had improved slightly, and some of the pressure affecting her brain appeared to be stabilizing. "That sounds good," I said. "It is encouraging," she replied. "It is not the same as safe. The next day still matters." She helped arrange a video call between our rooms. Maisie was awake, but only barely. Her eyes opened when the nurse said my name. She could not manage a conversation, so the nurse placed a marker in her hand and held a small whiteboard beneath it. Maisie wrote 3 uneven words. "Are you hurt?" "I'm sore," I told her. "The doctors expected that." She stared at the screen, unconvinced. I held my hand toward the camera. "Can you squeeze your nurse's hand for me?" Her fingers closed weakly around the nurse's thumb. "That counts," I said. "I'm counting it." Maisie's eyes drifted shut. The call ended before either of us could pretend she had more strength than she did. A hospital attorney joined Rosa beside my bed shortly afterward. Dana Whitcomb appeared on a secured video call with a lawyer from CNN. They were not asking for Maisie's chart, and they were not asking the hospital to confirm anything about her diagnosis. Dana explained what the network intended to report. CNN had independently verified that Brightvale placed batch SB41C on quality hold, that the batch contained undeclared acetaminophen in inconsistent amounts, and that boxes from the batch were transferred to the commercial studio. The report would also state that I had undergone an emergency living donor evaluation and donated part of my liver. "That last part belongs to you," the hospital attorney said. "You may authorize information about your own surgery. You cannot authorize disclosure of Maisie's protected medical information." "I understand." Dana asked what I was comfortable confirming. "You may say I was evaluated and approved as a living donor, and that I donated part of my liver," I said. "You may not use photographs from the ICU. You may not quote Maisie's chart or describe her condition on my authority. You do not speak for her." Dana agreed without bargaining. If Sloan disclosed Maisie's diagnosis during the interview, CNN could respond to what Sloan herself placed into the public record. Until then, the network would not identify the specific medical crisis. The discussion moved to Evan Cole's footage. Evan joined through his attorney and explained how the Sunbury commercial had been recorded. Camera A captured the polished image selected for the campaign. It framed Maisie from the shoulders up, followed the approved script, and stopped after her final smile. Camera B had a different purpose. It recorded a wider continuity angle used to resolve editing disputes and document what happened on set for production insurance. The director's monitor displayed Camera A, so Sloan watched the commercial frame and assumed recording ended when that camera stopped. Camera B continued for 8 additional seconds. Evan did not describe those seconds to me. CNN's lawyer said revealing the contents before the live broadcast could create new disputes over context and publication. What mattered for the moment was whether the file was authentic. Both cameras shared synchronized time codes. Their slate numbers, studio audio, and production dates matched. Metadata showed Camera B had been created during the same take and had remained on Evan's original storage system. The file had not been exported, edited, or reassembled. Brightvale's attorneys had been given an opportunity to inspect the authentication report. They acknowledged that Camera A was the official approved master. They said they had not known Camera B was still recording, and argued that footage outside the approved commercial should not be broadcast. "They are not claiming it is fake?" I asked. "No," Dana said. "They are claiming it was never meant to be seen." That distinction told me more than a denial would have. Dana also explained the position Sloan intended to take. Brightvale's attorneys had sent a written response describing Anika as a disgruntled former employee, me as an estranged sister exploiting a family crisis, and Maisie as a child who had removed a prototype without permission. Sloan planned to use the approved commercial to show that Maisie had been healthy and willing during production. Leah Morrison had sent a separate notice stating that Sloan no longer had authority to speak for Brightvale's board. The board had not yet completed its formal vote, but Leah warned her not to represent the appearance as an official company response. Sloan was going anyway. Dana ended the call to prepare for the broadcast. Rosa helped lower my chair because the muscles in my abdomen had begun trembling. Before the nurse could return me to bed, my phone lit up with a voicemail notification. Sloan had called while I was speaking with CNN. Rosa played the message through the phone's speaker. "When this is over, Maisie will know you destroyed her inheritance. She will understand that you took advantage of her illness because you could never build a life anyone wanted." The message ended with a quiet click. I did not call her back. The hospital attorney preserved the voicemail and sent a copy to the attorneys handling the Brightvale investigation. I placed the phone face down and concentrated on standing long enough for the nurse to move me back to bed. Sloane wanted me angry, because anger was easier to dismiss than evidence. She wanted a fight between sisters, because a family feud sounded smaller than a quarantined product and an injured child. The CNN program began shortly before noon. A nurse moved the television remote within reach and dimmed the room. Dana appeared behind the news desk and explained that Brightvale had been given an opportunity to review the evidence and respond. She summarized the quarantine order, the laboratory findings, and the shipment records without mentioning anything from Maisie's medical file. Then the screen changed. Sloane sat beneath white studio lights, wearing a white suit almost identical to the one she had worn in Brightvale's first national campaign. Her hair fell neatly over one shoulder. There was no bag beside her, and no hospital bracelet on her wrist. Dana asked whether Sloane was speaking for Brightvale. "I am speaking as a mother whose daughter's tragedy has been weaponized," Sloane said. She called Annika dishonest and said I had resented her success for years. She claimed Maisie had taken an unreleased product from a restricted area, then combined it with ordinary cold medicine without anyone's knowledge. Dana asked why Brightvale's own records showed the product had been delivered to the studio. Sloane said, "Samples often appeared on sets for visual testing and were never intended for consumption." "What about the commercial showing Maisie eating them?" Dana asked. Sloane's mouth softened into the practiced expression she used whenever she wanted the audience to believe she was the calmest person in the room. "The footage shows a healthy, happy child participating willingly in a campaign she loved. My sister is trying to turn a family accident into a crime because she finally found a stage large enough for her jealousy." Dana asked whether the network had received the correct Brightvale master. "Yes," Sloane said. "Camera A is the full approved master take. It has not been manipulated, and it shows exactly what happened." Dana remained silent. Sloane leaned forward, certain that silence belonged to her. "Play the commercial. Let America see what my sister is trying to turn into a crime." The screen filled with Maisie's face. Her cheeks were bright beneath studio makeup. She held a purple sunberry chew between two fingers, placed it in her mouth, and smiled on cue. "Mom always makes sure I get the safest one first," she said. The image froze at the approved ending. For years, I had believed that smile because it looked like the child I loved. Lying beneath the hospital blankets, I finally saw the effort inside it. Her shoulders were too still. Her eyes waited for permission to stop. The master ended before the poison inside her had finished entering her body. The frozen image of Maisie remained on the television long enough for Sloane to smile. She sat straighter beneath the studio lights, one hand resting lightly on the desk as though she had just corrected a misunderstanding. The approved commercial had shown exactly what Brightvale wanted America to see. My niece looked healthy beneath the makeup. She placed the purple chew in her mouth, smiled on cue, and said her mother always gave her the safest one first. Sloane turned toward Dana Whitcomb. "That is my daughter, happy, healthy, and proud to be part of what we built together." Dana did not challenge the words immediately. She arranged 3 documents on the desk, while the commercial image disappeared from the screen behind them. "The footage we just aired came from Camera A," she said. "Brightvale has confirmed that it is the approved master used for the campaign." "Yes," Sloane replied. "The full approved master take. You asked us to play it because you believe it shows the complete circumstances of the shoot. It shows what happened. Maisie participated willingly. She was not forced, and she was not ill because of anything Brightvale gave her." Dana asked whether Sloane wanted to explain why her daughter was currently hospitalized. Sloane's expression shifted into grief so smoothly that I might once have believed it. "Maisie suffered acute liver failure after taking an excessive amount of an unreleased sample and then using an ordinary cold medication," she said. "It was a terrible accident. My sister has exploited that accident to create the impression that I knowingly harmed my own child." The room around me seemed to contract. Until that moment, CNN had not named Maisie's diagnosis. The hospital had released nothing, and I had authorized only information about my own operation. Sloane had placed her daughter's liver failure into the public record, because she believed she could control the explanation attached to it. Dana allowed the silence to settle before continuing. Our investigation received a second recording from the same production day. It was made by Camera B, a continuity camera required under the production insurance agreement. Its time code is synchronized with Camera A. Sloane's fingers stopped moving. Dana explained that CNN had not treated the file as authentic merely because a former editor supplied it. The network had verified the metadata, slate number, studio audio, production date, storage history, and retention terms in Evan Cole's contract. Brightvale's attorneys had reviewed the authentication report. They do not claim the recording was fabricated, Dana said. They argue only that it was never approved for public use. Sloane leaned toward her microphone. Footage outside the final commercial can be misleading. Sets are chaotic. Children become tired. That does not prove a product caused anything. We are going to show 8 seconds, Dana replied. They begin at the exact point where the approved master ends. The screen changed back to Maisie. For one heartbeat, the image matched what we had already seen. Her smile remained fixed. Her hands stayed folded around the Sunbury package. Then Camera A stopped, and Camera B continued. Maisie turned sharply away from the lens and covered her mouth. An assistant rushed forward with a white towel just before she vomited into it. Someone beyond the frame asked, "Should we call the medic?" Maisie wiped her lips and stared at the half-chewed piece in her hand. "This one is bitter," she said. "It doesn't taste like the other box." Sloane's voice came from beside the camera. "Don't mention the box." The assistant asked again whether filming should stop. Sloane stepped into the wide frame. She looked at her daughter's face, looked at the clock mounted above the studio door, and held out a bottle of water. "Clean her mouth. Give her a minute. We only need one more clean take." The recording ended. No dramatic music followed. Dana said nothing. Even the usual movement inside the CNN studio seemed to stop. Sloane stared at the monitor beside her. The color had drained from her face, but her posture remained rigid, as though holding her shoulders still could prevent the rest of her life from moving. I pressed the pillow against my incision. My body hurt with every breath, yet I felt no triumph. All I could see was Maisie trying not to disappoint the person who had already watched her become sick. Dana placed the quarantine email on the screen. "This is an internal Brightvale quality hold, issued 12 days before the commercial shoot. It identifies batch SB41C. A second document appeared beside it. This independent laboratory report found undeclared acetaminophen in sealed retention samples from the same batch. The amount varied significantly from chew to chew. A third record showed 6 boxes transferred from the development facility to the studio under an instruction entered, as approved by the CEO's office." Sloane found her voice again. "I was never told the batch was dangerous. Annika Shaw removed samples after she was fired. She had the opportunity to alter them." Dana displayed the custody log. "The samples were sealed before Dr. Shaw's termination. 2 Brightvale technicians recorded the seal numbers. The cooler was transferred directly to an independent laboratory through Whistleblower Council. The receiving laboratory documented intact seals bearing those same numbers." Sloane looked away from Dana and toward someone beyond the camera, probably one of the lawyers who had promised she could still win. "Dr. Shaw wanted revenge," she said. "The records do not show alteration," Dana replied. "They show that she requested the batch remain quarantined." Sloane's voice sharpened. "You are presenting documents without understanding how product development works." Dana did not argue about manufacturing. She asked the only question that mattered. "When your daughter entered the hospital, why did you not tell the treatment team that she had consumed a product from a quarantined batch?" Sloane's face hardened. "My daughter took samples without permission. The footage shows the product being handed to her during a Brightvale shoot. My sister coached her while she was frightened and medicated. Your sister was undergoing surgery when this recording was authenticated." Sloane turned toward the main camera. "Bethany has resented me since the day I built something larger than her small life. She donated because she wanted the world to see her as the savior. The words no longer reached me the way they once had. A nurse checked the line in my arm while the woman on television tried to turn a poisoned child into a rivalry between sisters. Dana announced that CNN had received a statement from Leah Morrison, chair of Brightvale's board. Leah appeared by video from a conference room. She read from a resolution prepared during the board's emergency review. Effective immediately, Sloan was suspended as chief executive officer. Her access to company systems, facilities, communications accounts, and personnel was revoked pending an independent investigation. The suspension did not take her shares. It did not erase her ownership. It removed her power to act for Brightvale. Additional notices followed because the companies involved had not waited for the broadcast to begin making plans. Brightvale's largest retail partners placed Sunbury products on hold. The investment bank handling the proposed public offering postponed the filing. Brightvale ordered a nationwide recall of all Sunbury products, while testing expanded beyond SB 41C. Sloan watched each notice appear on the studio monitor. The empire did not collapse in one explosion. It came apart in permissions withdrawn, passwords disabled, shelves emptied, and people who once waited for her approval deciding they no longer needed it. The program ended without Dana declaring Sloan guilty of a crime. She said regulators and investigators would determine legal responsibility. My phone rang less than a minute later. Sloan's name filled the screen. I considered letting it stop, then answered without putting the call on speaker. Her breathing was uneven. "How could you do this to me?" I looked at the television, where Maisie's frozen commercial smile had been replaced by a Brightvale recall notice. "I was in surgery," I said. "You did it while the camera was still rolling. You gave them everything." "I gave them nothing from Maisie's hospital file. You let them destroy her future. You were asked why you hid a quarantined product from her doctors. You still haven't answered." Sloan began to speak, but I ended the call. The phone landed softly on the blanket. On television, commentators were still discussing Brightvale, the recall, and the board investigation. I turned my face away from the screen. The nurse stood beside my bed. "How is Maisie?" Before she could answer, Dr. Grant entered. Her expression was tired, but there was something new beneath the caution. "The graft is functioning better than we expected at this stage," she said. "Her clotting and circulation are improving." "Is she awake?" "Not fully. She has responded to stimulation, but she has not woken enough to speak with us." The television continued talking about the future Sloan had lost. I watched the door instead, waiting to learn whether Maisie would live long enough to have one of her own. The first week after the broadcast, I learned that recovery was made of humiliations too small for television. A nurse taught me how to cough while pressing a pillow against my incision, so the muscles would not feel as though they were splitting apart. I had to prove I could walk to the bathroom, keep down soup, and climb 3 practice steps before anyone discussed sending me home. Every movement required planning. Even laughing hurt. Maisie woke in pieces. At first, she opened her eyes only long enough to follow a voice. Later, she squeezed a hand, answered simple questions, and complained that the hospital gelatin tasted like cold window glass. Her liver numbers continued improving, but the doctors warned us that infection, rejection, and the damage caused before surgery still had to be watched. We were not discharged together. I went home first with medication, lifting restrictions, and a schedule that treated my body like a job I could not quit. Maisie remained in the hospital while her transplant team adjusted anti-rejection drugs and made sure she could eat, walk, and manage without intensive monitoring. Rosa visited me before I left. She had submitted a neglect report based on more than Sloan walking out of the hospital. The report documented the hidden exposure, the false ingredient sheet, the plan to blame Maisie, and the pressure placed on her after surgery. "Leaving was cruel," Rosa said. "Concealing what the doctors needed and continuing to coach a sick child are the facts the agency can act on." Mecklenburg County DSS requested non-secure custody while the investigation continued. That did not make me Maisie's legal parent. DSS held legal custody, and I could only be considered for kinship placement after a home study, background checks, a medical review, and a plan showing how I would care for a transplant patient while recovering from major surgery myself. For once, my love for Maisie was not treated as proof that I could safely meet every need. The social worker inspected the stairs, counted medications, checked the bathroom, and asked who would drive us to appointments when neither of us could manage alone. My supervisor arranged flexible leave. A neighbor agreed to handle groceries. A home health nurse would visit us both. The process felt intrusive until I understood what it was protecting us from. Sloan had spent years turning appearances into evidence. DSS wanted evidence that survived appearances. 2 weeks after surgery, one of Sloan's attorneys asked whether Maisie would record a short video. The proposed script said her mother had never forced her to take Sunbury, that she loved participating in Brightvale campaigns, and that the family needed privacy while they healed. The request was presented during a supervised meeting with a child advocate present. I was not allowed in the room, and I did not hear about it until afterward. Maisie told the advocate, "I don't want to do another take." She did not give a speech. She did not accuse Sloan of poisoning her. She only refused to perform, and for an 11-year-old who had spent half her life being asked for one cleaner version, that refusal was enough. Other families began reporting reactions linked to Sunbury products. Investigators did not assume every illness had the same cause. Some reports involved different batches, different symptoms, or no medical documentation at all. The independent review separated what could be verified from what could not. Brightvale's board released a statement acknowledging that growth targets and the proposed public offering had created pressure to minimize quality warnings. They terminated the Sunbury line, expanded the recall, and placed an independent administrator over a compensation process for affected customers. The board also removed Sloan as chief executive officer. Her access to company accounts, data systems, facilities, and signature authority was revoked. Her shares did not vanish, but she could no longer act for Brightvale or use its employees to defend herself. I learned that from a public filing and a news report. The report showed workers taking Sloan's nameplate from the executive conference room. I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to swallow pain medication without becoming nauseated. The image lasted 4 seconds, then disappeared beneath a discussion of regulators reviewing altered safety records, deletion instructions, and possible obstruction. There was no victory music in my kitchen. There was only a pill organizer, a walking cane I hated, and an empty bedroom waiting for Maisie. By the time she was medically ready to leave the hospital, DSS had approved my home for temporary kinship placement. Maisie arrived wearing a mask, carrying a list of medications longer than her school supply list, and moving as carefully as an old woman. She stopped inside the doorway and stared at the living room. "No cameras?" she asked. "Not unless you count the smoke detector." She looked up at it suspiciously. "Does it have a red light?" "It does, but its only job is to scream when I burn dinner." That earned me a tired smile. The family hearing took place several weeks later. I sat beside my attorney with a cushion against my abdomen. Sloan sat across the room in a dark suit, no longer surrounded by Brightvale staff. She told the court I had always wanted her life and was using a temporary crisis to steal her daughter. She said the company had been built for Maisie's future and that removing Maisie from her care would punish a mother for making one frightened decision under impossible pressure. I did not argue about who loved Maisie more. Love was not the part of the record that needed proving. When my attorney asked what I had personally observed, I kept to the facts. Sloan left after doctors asked her to begin donor evaluation. She withheld the quarantined product exposure. She allowed Brightvale to claim Maisie took the chews without permission. After the transplant, she continued asking Maisie to repeat that story on camera. The guardian ad litem had already met with Maisie privately. I was not told every word Maisie said, and I did not ask. Her interview belonged to her. The judge continued DSS non-secure custody and approved Maisie's kinship placement in my home while the case was reviewed. Sloan was granted supervised contact only. The court did not issue a permanent custody decision that day. It ordered further reports, treatment compliance, and another review after Maisie had more time to recover. The judge also barred Sloan from signing new commercial permissions on Maisie's behalf. Bright Vale had already voted to remove existing campaigns, while a separate civil consent order concerning Maisie's name, image, and medical story was being prepared. Outside the courtroom, Sloan approached me before the supervisor redirected her. "You think this makes you her mother?" she said. "No," I replied. "It makes me the place the court believes is safe right now." That answer angered her more than a claim would have, because it gave her nothing dramatic to fight. That evening, Maisie curled beneath a blanket on my sofa while I sorted our medications into separate trays. She watched me for a long time before asking, "Do I have to call you something different now?" I sat beside her carefully. "No, you never have to rename love to prove it is real." She nodded, as though I had answered a practical question, then fell asleep before the movie reached its second scene. My phone lit up with 2 appointments scheduled 6 months later. One was for the Living Donor Clinic. The other was for pediatric transplant follow-up. For the first time since the hospital doors closed behind Sloan, the future did not look like a deadline. It looked like 2 names printed beside 2 times on the same ordinary day. 6 months after the transplant, the last photograph of Maisie disappeared from Bright Vale's website. I watched it happen in a conference room with my attorney, a lawyer for the company's new owners, and a court-appointed representative for Maisie. The page refreshed once, and the image of my niece holding a purple Sunberry package became an empty white space. The removal was not part of the custody order. Bright Vale was a separate corporation, so it required a separate civil consent order signed by the company, its distributors, and me in my role as Maisie's legal custodian. They agreed to remove her name, face, voice, diagnosis, and medical story from every commercial campaign, archive, retailer display, and promotional license they controlled. For most of her childhood, strangers had been allowed to use Maisie's smile because her mother had signed a form. Now no one could sign another one without court approval and an independent review of Maisie's interests. Bright Vale itself had survived, though not in the form Sloan created. The company was sold, divided, and rebuilt under new management. Sunberry vanished from the product line. The new owners abandoned the public offering and spent months paying for recalls, independent testing, legal claims, and a compensation process for affected families. Sloan still owned shares on paper, but they were worth a fraction of what they had been before the broadcast. Misconduct provisions in the restructuring agreement froze much of what remained, while civil cases continued. Regulators were still reviewing the false labeling, the unapproved drug claims, altered safety records, and efforts to conceal the quarantined batch. No one promised me she would go to prison. Courts required evidence, hearings, and time. Revenge stories often ended with handcuffs, because handcuffs were easy to see. Sloan's punishment was quieter and more permanent. She lost the company she had treated as proof of her worth. She lost the right to speak for Bright Vale. She lost the right to use Maisie's face to rebuild her reputation. Most of all, she lost the assumption that being Maisie's mother automatically entitled her to control Maisie's life. At the 6-month permanency hearing, the juvenile court reviewed reports from DSS, Maisie's guardian ad litem, her doctors, her therapist, and the supervisor who attended every visit with Sloan. The judge found that Sloan's conduct had been inconsistent with the responsibilities of a parent. Legal and physical custody were transferred to me on a long-term basis. Sloan could continue supervised visitation only if she followed the treatment plan and stopped discussing the investigation, Bright Vale, or public statements with Maisie. When the judge asked whether I understood that custody was a duty rather than a reward, I said yes. I understood it every morning, when 3 medication alarms rang before breakfast. Sloan sent an apology through the visitation supervisor after the hearing. Maisie asked me to read it aloud. The letter began well enough. Sloan said she was sorry that Maisie had been frightened and hurt. Then she wrote that she had been under unbearable pressure, that no one understood what it meant to carry hundreds of employees, and that she hoped Maisie would someday recognize how much her mother had sacrificed for her future. Maisie listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. "She still thinks the worst thing that happened was losing the company," she said. "She may need more time to understand what she did." Do I have to help her understand? No. Do I have to forgive her before I'm allowed to stop being angry? No. Maisie nodded. Then I'm not ready to see her without Miss Parker there. I told the supervisor exactly that. I did not soften it, and I did not turn it into a permanent declaration. Forgiveness belonged to Maisie. So did the decision not to offer it. Her life had begun to expand beyond courtrooms and hospital corridors. She returned to school for half days, then full days when her strength allowed it. She did not become a spokesperson for transplant awareness, a child activist, or the face of another campaign. Most students knew she had been sick. Very few knew why. Maisie joined the science club and built a model showing how the liver could regenerate after living donation. She used 2 colors of clay to represent the part left in the donor and the part transplanted into the recipient. Her teacher praised the model and asked how she had learned so much. Maisie said, "I researched it. That was all she wanted to share. So, it was enough." I returned to work 3 days a week. My supervisor did not promote me, name a program after me, or treat me like a hero. She adjusted my workload, reminded me not to carry heavy archive boxes, and complained when I answered emails after hours. Ordinary kindness felt better than public admiration. On the morning of our 6-month follow-up, Maisie and I arrived at Street Catherine with appointments 20 minutes apart. My scar had faded from red to pale pink, though it still pulled when I twisted too quickly. Maisie's scar curved beneath her ribs like a line drawn by someone learning where one life could safely meet another. The ultrasound technician recognized us but did not mention CNN. She examined me first, moving the probe slowly across my abdomen while gray shapes formed on the monitor. "The remaining liver has regenerated well," she said. "Your blood flow looks normal." Maisie watched the screen from the chair beside me. When it was her turn, she climbed onto the second examination bed. Another monitor came alive as the technician studied the transplanted section, its vessels, and the flow through it. Dr. Grant entered after reviewing both sets of images. She stood between the 2 screens, one showing the liver that had remained inside me, and the other showing the part now growing inside Maisie. "Both are functioning well," she said. "Bethany's liver has restored much of its volume, and the graft has grown with Maisie's needs." Maisie looked from one screen to the other. "So it didn't become mine?" Dr. Grant glanced at me, allowing me to answer. "It became part of you," I said. "That isn't the same as owning it." Maisie considered that for a moment. "Good. Mom always wanted to own everything she put her name on." I did not correct her, defend Sloan, or turn the moment into a lesson. I reached across the space between the examination beds and took her hand. Her fingers were warmer than mine. After the appointments, we stopped at a small diner near the hospital. There were no photographers outside, no company drivers, and no assistant carrying approved talking points. Maisie studied the menu for so long that the waitress returned twice. "You can choose anything," I told her. "I know. That's why it's taking longer." She finally ordered blueberry pancakes, scrambled eggs, and hot chocolate with too much whipped cream. When the plate arrived, she rearranged the blueberries into a crooked ring and took a photograph for herself. She did not post it. I ordered coffee and toast. Sunlight moved across the table, catching the edge of her glass and the faint scar visible above my waistband when I reached for the sugar. Maisie ate slowly, stopping when she was full rather than when someone told her the take was finished. Around us, dishes clattered, people talked, and a baby cried near the window. Nothing was polished enough for an advertisement. For the first time, nothing in the room needed a logo, a camera, or a perfect take to prove it was alive.